right, we are live, and I am here today with Julie Creffield, author of this fantastic book, which I actually just got here on my desk, which I refer to regularly at the moment since I've had it a couple of weeks now. How Not to Be Broke, which is a fantastic book about money, self-worth, leaving a legacy from your solopreneur business. And I know that Julie has got a lot of really interesting insights that I'm sure that you, as a homeowner looking to make changes, big changes in your life, potentially through changes to your home, Julie has got a lot of really fascinating insights to share. And I'd love to invite you, Julie, to give an introduction to yourself, if that's okay.
Sure, absolutely. So I always say I'm a business legacy strategist, and people say, "Oh, what's that?" And I think what it is in a nutshell is I just help particularly business owners to think about what they want as a result of their business. You know, we often think that legacy is about what we leave behind. I think it's more about what we choose for ourselves and for the people that we serve each and every day. And of course, you know, as business owners, what we do affects our family as well. So that's what I do. I've got a very varied background. I've always worked in change and transformation. I do a little bit of work around life coaching, you know, using very similar principles. And I'm a 14-time author. So, you know, my dream as a kid was to be an author. That's all I've ever wanted to be. So, you know, over and above everything else, I love just sharing my thoughts and views and challenging people's understanding of themselves through my books. That's what lights me up.
That's amazing. And it's really interesting, actually, that conversation around legacy, because I think a lot of people, the home is a huge personal investment. And there are thoughts about what are you leaving for your children, and your home being part of that. I mean, that just, have you got any thoughts around that?
I am so conflicted about sense of home. I really am. And, you know, the book has helped me to really think about what we were taught growing up about the role of home. Right. And so I was one of 6 children growing up, and my mum got cancer. My dad left. So in effect, my mum became a single parent of 6 kids, and we lost our family home. And I think that house, it was a big 5-bedroom house. And I think that was the thing that probably tore my parents apart, the pressure of that mortgage. And then, you know, we become homeless. We lived in a really awful house on a housing estate. And that really kind of was a huge part of our story growing up. You know, we went from being, you know, yes, a big family, but kind of okay, to being in extreme poverty. And that small experience of being homeless really shaped my thoughts about home, because we left our home with nothing. All of our toys got put into storage and we never got them back, you know. And so what I can remember feeling like, I cannot wait to become a homeowner. You know, it was a big drive for me to create wealth for myself so that I never felt that insecurity around home. But now so much has happened. You know, I am a homeowner, and I lived in my old apartment for 16 years, but I also felt trapped by home ownership. So I'm really torn around what I believe about home ownership now. I think, you know, I think the housing landscape is different to what it was when our parents were, you know, were buying into housing. And I don't know. I don't know what I will teach my daughter Rose about whether that's the be all and end all, because, you know, some of my siblings who are not as affluent as me, they still have this dream of owning homes. And I'm like, you know, you're in your 40s, you know, like that is such I don't know, it's such a big chunk of your income every month. And sometimes, you know, you buy a house so that you can leave it to your kids, but our kids are going to be in a different frame of mind, and that they may not want to be secured to one place. And so I'm still working through all of this stuff, but I do think that your home and your environment, whether you own your home or whether you rent, your actual home, your home environment is so important. You know, how you feel in it, what you allow yourself to have. And obviously the book is about money, and we can make upgrades in our home, even if we can't live in our so-called dream home. There's always something we can do to bring in what we want in the here and now, even if it's only a little bit temporary. So
really interesting.
It's so juicy, some of this stuff.
There's a lot to unpick, isn't there? I don't know if you've read the book I Will Teach You to Be Rich by Ramit Sethi. That's a really interesting one. And I read it with my partner, and we were exploring, our own attitudes separately and as a couple to money, which is, that's always another interesting thing, isn't it? When it's not just you, but it's you and another person, and you've got to sort of create this path together. But that book's really fascinating because it does challenge that idea that home ownership is the be all and end all, and that his personal approach to that is that he feels it's better to rent for him, and that the finances, having that finance tied up within a home, there's all these different ideas, like, is your home really an asset or is it a liability? And these are really fascinating ideas to take into account. I know personally with my house, I have made money from my house. I bought my house just after I'd been made redundant, and being able to rent out rooms and have lodgers, that actually enabled me to build my own business, get started in that way, and gave me that financial security and stability that I needed. So there's lots of different ways to look at it. It is complex, and there's no real right or wrong, I think, for any one person.
And it does depend on your circumstances. Like, I used to live in London, one of the most expensive cities in the world to own a house. And so when I was looking to get on the property ladder, I was in, I don't know, 25 or something, and I had a job. I was working on the Olympics, and I knew I wanted to own a house, and I couldn't afford it. And then, this part by part rent scheme came, and I was working for a local authority, which made me eligible for it. And I thought, great, a step onto the property ladder. But actually that way of buy-in actually meant that I was kind of double whammy. So you have the stress of being a homeowner, but then you're also paying a significant amount of rent that you have no control over. And my rent and service charge went up more than my mortgage actually was, and then I got caught up in the cladding issue. So for 3 years, I wasn't able to sell, by which time my lease ran out. So it's all so complex. And, all I wanted, I think the pandemic was definitely a big part of this for me. When I bought my flat, I was a single person, and I used to have a lodger because, I had a 2-bedroom apartment, and the lodger gave me company and an extra income and all of those kind of things. But when my daughter came along, it was fine when she was a toddler, but then there was no outdoor space, and I didn't want to live in an apartment block, and I wanted more freedom and all of those things. And then I felt trapped. So I can't believe I stayed there for 16 years, and because I didn't own it outright, you're limited to what home improvements you can do, and you can't control who your neighbors are or whether the lift is broke. All of those things had such a negative impact on me. And then, of course, the pandemic, I was like, oh my God. And so the move to where I currently live felt like the craziest thing ever. Why would I go from being a homeowner into a rental property that costs the earth? It's so expensive here, but the quality of life, you can't put a price on that. And I could have had to, with entrepreneurship, your income is always up and down, up and down. It's so hard to get a mortgage. And so I had this question in my mind was, am I going to wait another 5 or 6 years until I can afford the property of my dreams? Or do I take the hit on not being a homeowner and not building that asset and actually have the lifestyle that I want, that gives my daughter that lived experience of having space and being outside of London? And I've had to choose that, because otherwise we might never have experienced it.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because one of the questions that I get asked a lot from my clients is, is it going to be, is this worth doing or is this better? You know, which is the best choice? Which changes are going to make the most impact for them? And that's such a personal decision, really, and a personal estimation of what's value, what is value for you, what's going to create a quality of life for you, what is a high quality of life from your perspective, because that's going to be so different for each person.
And it comes down to values, doesn't it? And so, you know, I've been talking a lot recently about, you know, 2020 was the most challenging year of our lives for most people on this planet. And I made the most amount of money in business than I ever have, you know, over £250,000 worth of revenue. Like, that is, for a single parent, that was life-changing. But the cost of that to my health, to my well-being, to my ethics, to my integrity, would I do that again for that amount of money? No way. There's no amount of money that would make me endure that year. And so, you know, for me, it's about looking at all of the metrics that matter in your life, all of the values that are important to you. And even though a higher percentage of my income now goes on housing costs, I step out into beautiful countryside and I live in a house that was built in 1850, and the history, every day I just feel blessed at the energy of this place, you know, and you can't put a price on that. You just can't.
Yeah. That's, I mean, in terms of, so we've kind of looked at, you know, what was that change from the moving from your London flat and into this home, and how that's had an impact on the quality of your life. But in terms of change generally, and your book is about, you know, how not to be broke, and so in some ways it's like how to fix the stuff that's broken. In terms of that, you know, what do you suggest that people do when they're thinking, you know, to identify, you know, what are the things that they need to change, and then how to actually like motivate yourself to make those changes, because that change can be really difficult, can't it? And I know that you've got the Year to Change program, and that's really a big thing for you, is change.
It is.
But it can be a scary thing as well, so exciting and scary.
I mean, the thing is, we never get taught how to navigate change, but it's something that we all as humans have to experience. And so whether we are more on the lucky side in life, or somebody who seems, you know, unlucky or has more challenges, there will always come a point where you find yourself going, my God, something has to change. And it could be to do with your environment or your relationships or your job, and we can often feel broke, right? So you could be the wealthiest person in the world and still feel broke. So actually, yes, the book is about money, and yes, it's about business, and yes, it's about, you know, wealth, but it's also about your health and your spirituality and your purpose. And so I always say, whenever we feel trapped, quite often we jump to a solution. We have something bad happens, we go, right, this needs fixing, and we go straight to the solution. And so in the book there's a model, and it's more about kind of retreating away from the problem. We can't fix a problem while we're in the middle of it. And so giving ourselves space to say, what is the actual problem? What is going on here? How did I arrive here? Like, without any shame and blame and all of that, but just, how am I here? And then kind of reflecting, you know, looking at the kind of possibilities for change. So normally we go, right, that's what I'm going to do, rather than going, oh, there are 4 or 5 different options here. Let me research which option would be the best one. Because what we often do is we make the same mistakes over and over again, because we try to fix them with the same solutions. And that's because we don't give ourselves enough time and space to explore what's really going on. And so then it's about saying, right, okay, so now I've got an idea of what I might do to change. How am I going to resource that? Am I going to resource that with money? Am I going to resource that with time and effort? You know, am I going to resource that through asking for help? You know, and it's only when you understand what resources you have to change, you can create the right plan of action, and then go into kind of dealing with it, you know, and quite often we try to fix problems without any resource, and then we just go into this spiral of like lack and like everything feels hard. But you know, change can be exciting, and so I think it always starts with asking yourself that really simple question: what is it I want? You know, what do I truly want? I'm forever asking my clients that. What is it you want? Because then we can build backwards. And I think a lot of people feel uncomfortable saying what they want, because somewhere along the line they've been told it's not available to them, or you shouldn't, you know, you're selfish, you've already got a nice life, why do you want more? You know, we're told that it's, you know, we shouldn't keep wanting, you know, it's, don't be too ambitious, don't want nice things. And, you know, it's like we put this sense of, oh, we know what kind of person you are if you want XYZ, right? But we get to decide what we want, you know. No and this is why I love your stuff around vision boards. You know, I love a vision board, but we don't have to be completely attached to it, you know. And I remember for ages I had a white Range Rover on my vision board, and I was like, when I'm wealthy, that's what I'll have. And I'm a big believer in, if you want something but you can't have it now, how can you find ways of kind of having it now, right? So just experiencing what it might feel like. And so I remember going into a showroom and like sitting in the white Range Rover, and I just had this moment of going, oh, it's not actually that exciting. I'm not sure that I even want it anymore. And so I bought a Nissan Qashqai instead, and I love my Qashqai. Like, I literally, every time I get in it, I'm like, oh, I love my car. And so I should have like ripped that off of my vision board because I didn't want it anymore.
That reminds me of one thing I advise I advise some of my clients is often, you know, when you're looking at redesigning your home, there'll be spaces that you've never experienced before. So a lot of people are kind of exploring the idea of having a big open plan kitchen diner type of space, and if they've never lived in a home with that, they can be you know, want that because that's what they see a lot of other people are getting, but at the same time have never experienced it. So that's one of the suggestions that I have made to clients in the past, is go and rent somewhere for a weekend, a holiday home that has that kind of space, and try it out. See if you like it.
That is how I've ended up here. So like, you know, when you say, right, what kind of house do I want? And I couldn't really articulate it. And so I knew the kind of geographical area I wanted to look in. And so I was just going and looking at loads of houses, and they all left me feeling quite dead. And I was like, oh, I just don't know what I want. And then Rose and I were looking for something to do for Christmas one year, and I booked a little wood cabin. And I can remember being in this tiny little wood cabin. It was beautiful, and it was really small and condensed. But it just had this vibe, and I thought, I'd love to live somewhere like this. Like, this would be a really cool, you know, wooden, you know, in the middle of nature. And then literally about 6 months later, this barn popped up on Zoopla, and it was for rent. It wasn't to buy. And I just kept an eye on it. And I was like, oh, I'd love a place to buy to come up. And it just never did. And then after seeing all of these houses that left me dead, I thought, oh, let me just go and have a look at the barn to see how I feel in it. I literally walked into the boot store, and I just knew I had to have this house. Like, literally, I hadn't even seen the bedrooms. I hadn't seen the main area. I hadn't even thought like if things would fit or how much the council tax would be. I just didn't think any of it, but just energetically, it felt like a good fit for me. And like, I think I'd been making lots of little upgrades at home, so that, like, in my old home, so that when I moved here, yes, I had to buy a few bits of furniture to make it kind of feel right, but most of the upgrades I'd already made. So it still feels like home here. The jump between my 2-bed apartment in the city to this, you know, what is a 3-bed, you know, massive barn conversion, you know, with an office space. I'd never had an office space before, but because I'd done a lot of the thinking around how I wanted my office space to be, and I'd made many of the upgrades already in my flat. So now it's more about, I've got the space that I never had, but much of the lifestyle in terms of how I use my home is actually quite similar, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that's really interesting, because how your space is, it can define and restrict to some extent how you're able to live. And so it's interesting that you were figuring out how to live the way that you wanted, even though the space was tight and restricting to an extent. And now you've moved into a space that actually gives you the space that you needed. And have you felt that it's easier now because you've got, even though you were living the way that you wanted to live, but have you found it's kind of created more ease and pleasure in that?
There's definitely more pleasure. Like the barn is old and new, right? So it was built in 1850. I think that's the date I said it was. It's etched into the woodwork. But it's also a newly renovated barn. So it's only been renovated 2 years ago. So the kitchen is gorgeous, the bathrooms are gorgeous, but you've got all of these old beams and, like, you know, all of that, loads of cobwebs, loads of spiders. So it's easy to live in because of its beauty. In the winter, it's freezing cold, so that's a new thing for me to explore. The wildlife is unsettling. Like, sometimes I get up in the middle of the night to go and get water, and there's a slug on the kitchen floor, or a bat flew in one day. Like, all of these things feel like an adventure. What I didn't think about was, in my old place, my office was in the corner of the front room, so everything was reachable. Now I have to think about where I take things. So where is my notebook? Oh, it's in the office. And I'm forever going, oh, it's in the wrong room. You know, so it's taken me a while to find the flow of the house. But one of the things I love here is how much light there is. You know, there's light coming from all directions. So in the morning, as the sun comes up, there's a tree outside, and all of the shadows from the tree move around the barn. And so I just, nature, being so close to nature just is so good for my soul, and so I used to, in the flat, I used to just spend hours, 12 hours at my desk, whereas here I'm always reminded, like, I have a massive door and I will see a bit of nature and I go, oh, I'm going to go for a walk, and there's horses literally 30 seconds away from where I am. And so it's really difficult to overwork here. And I'm much more likely to switch off my computer once Rose is home and I'm in the main house. So having that separate workspace is huge for me. It's changed the dynamic between Rose and I. She knows when I'm in my office, I'm working, and when I'm not in the office, I'm not working, which she wasn't sure in the old place, because, everything was all in the same space,
Yeah, that's a massive thing, actually, being able to switch off and both immerse yourself in work when you're working from home, because work from home is such a huge thing. I mean, as you've been working from home for much longer, but for a lot of people it is only just a few years that they've been working since 2020, and so it is a big thing. I get a lot of clients saying, oh, we're working from home now and we can't see that changing, so they're starting to think of, okay, well, what can we do to improve things and make sure, if they're a couple as well and they're both working from home, and then they're kind of having to manage, if they're working in the same space, but then they've got Zoom calls and stuff to be on, and so that one of them has to go out of the room for a bit and all of that, handling those, juggling that kind of thing, and the thing about working from home and balancing your life, that work-life balance. I mean, is that really a thing? But that managing that when you're working from home does become more of a struggle.
Yeah, and I think there's something that I use across all of my work with business owners and with individuals, and I very much do it for myself, is I do something called icks and slicks. So icks are those bits where you're like, oh, just that's not working in my life. It's just like I go to do something and something stops me from doing it with ease. And so for me, in my old place, it used to be, it sounds ridiculous, but it used to be like herbs and spices. I had this tiny corner cupboard that I used to have to get boxes out to find the right curry paste, and it was, so my big thing when I moved in was that I was going to have a spice drawer. And so now I enjoy cooking because there is no icks around getting the right things. And so even in my office, like, everything I've thought through, and whenever I come across an ick, I go, oh, that's a bit of an ick. and then I find a solution. And there are some icks in life that are much more challenging. You can't just throw money at it. You have to think about a system or a process. And so one of the icks at the moment, which I have to keep telling myself off, it's not really an ick, but we're 20 minutes to the main road. And so it's why I don't go out that much, because anything that we want to do, we're 20 minutes to the main road and then another 10, 15 into town. And so it's a beautiful ride. Don't get me wrong. It's gorgeous countryside, but you just can't go anywhere fast. And so it does feel like a bit of an ick, but it's also a trade-off because where I am is beautiful. And so I'm always looking for where's the compromise? Where's the trade-off? And just being aware of the trade-off,
That's something I do with my clients as well. What are your moments of joy and pleasure in your daily life, and what can we do to enhance those and maximize those and extend them, and where are those moments of frustration and irritation, and we can design them out and find solutions that mean that they're completely gone.
And looking at where the investments are, where do you want to spend the money? I have a coffee pot that I adore, right?
And the color is beautiful.
It's gorgeous, and I've got all the cups that go with it. And when my sister found out how much that cost, she was like, "You spent what on that?" But every day it brings me joy, and I know she spends money on getting her fingernails done, or she spends money on other things which are important to her, and so I think that it's about just truly listening to the pleasure stuff. The pleasure stuff is so important.
Yeah, listen to your heart. That's what I always suggest. Well, Julie, this has been such a great conversation, and I was wondering, how would you suggest that people who are interested in learning more about you and finding out about the Year to Change perhaps, and where should they go to follow you about those?
Yep, it's really easy to find me online. I'm Julie Creffield pretty much everywhere. So either my website, juliecreffield.com, or LinkedIn, or all of the places you'd expect to find somebody, you can come and find me.
Okay, that's fabulous. Thank you so much, Julie.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been such a great conversation. I've really enjoyed it. And I'm kind of looking around my screen, kind of thinking, what do I do? Where do I press? I think I press end the screen. Okay, bye for now.
Thank you.
Oh,